Hello everyone and welcome to a very nice game from this year's US Championship. It is Fabiano Caruana versus Aleksandr Lenderman, and this is a game that was actually played in round 7. The reason I'm showing it now, because even though the finale was very intense, Fabi drew his game very quickly in the final round against Levon Arunan, and it was up to Ray Robson. Will he be able to beat Jeffrey Chong and force tiebreaks against Fabi? If he does not win, then Fabi is the clean winner, as he went into the final round half a point ahead of Ray Robson. Robson was unable to do it. He only got a draw, and that means that Fabi is the 2022 US champion. So I decided to show you this game with everything that's been happening. I wasn't able to cover all of the games that I wanted to, but it's such a nice one. Really shows absolute class, and I'm sure you guys are going to enjoy it. So let's dive straight into it. Like I said, from round 7 against Aleksandr Lenderman, Fabi has the white pieces, and he opens with pawn to c4. The English opening, we have c6, pawn to d4, and pawn to d5. Sorry about that. We have knight to f3 by Fabi, and now knight to f6. The Slav defense is on the board. We have queen to c2, and d captures on c4, abandoning the center very early on, but this is all very standard stuff. Pawn to e4, now pawn to b5, defending the c4 pawn, and now Fabi just undermines it with pawn to b3. C captures, a captures, and now pawn to e6. And if you count the pawns, you will see that Fabi is down a pawn, but this is a well-known line where white will get compensation for this. And it's also a line where one might seek a win with the white pieces. And here bishop to d2 is the move that everyone plays. But Fabi played bishop to d3, and there are only a handful of games with bishop to d3. And now we have pawn to a6, and it is now already, as of move 8, that we have a completely new game. So very exciting stuff very early on. The idea is the standard one. You defend the b5 pawn so you can advance this pawn to c5 and undermine white's strong center. You will put the bishop on b7, knight b to d7, the rook will come to c8, and, well, the usual stuff pretty much. So castles, we have bishop to e7, knight to c3, and now bishop to b7. We have rook to d1, aligning the rook nicely with the queen, and pawn to h6 now. The pawn might be a problem with all of this bishop-queen action on this diagonal. Once you push e5, the knight will have to move, the h7 will be undefended, so h6 definitely makes sense. And here Fabi makes a very tricky move. He plays queen e2, and it's such a nice move of keeping the black king in the center of the board. The problem is if black castles, black is already lost due to this queen to e2 move. Funny stuff, I know, but look at this. e5, now the knight has to move, knight to d5, you are attacking the undefended knight on c3, but now queen e4, you threaten checkmate, and the only way to deal with this sufficiently is to play g6, but this is such a weakening of black's position that you can't simply defend. Okay, now you have to capture because the knight on c3 is hanging, so let's say captures, attacks the queen, now queen e3, goes after the pawn here, and again, no good way to defend this. You're gonna have to play something like bishop g5, now captures, and now don't capture, but rather queen h3, open up a discovery from the bishop, force the trade on h5, and now after captures, then the h5 pawn will fall as well, and this is now a completely winning endgame for white. So this is why you cannot castle after queen to e2. Important to know. So knight b to d7, we have pawn to e5, and now knight to d5, attacking the knight on c3, so knight captures on d5, c captures, and now knight to e1. Now the queen can come to g4, put pressure on black's king side, and now queen to b6. The pawn is now free for grabs, and you don't have to worry about any discoveries from the bishop, as for the moment the bishop cannot deliver check. But okay, you're not also too crazy to just grab the pawn. You first have to check if it's possible to grab it. So here queen to g4 goes after the g7 pawn, g6, and now bishop to d2, just continuing development. Now the queen also guards the d4 pawn, so no worries there, and pawn to b4. Of course, what else are you going to play? Pawn to a5, pawn to a4 is the idea. Then you will have created a passed pawn on the b file. We have bishop to e3 by Fabi, and now pawn to a5. Okay, pawn to a5 makes sense. This was the plan all along. But now queen to e2. Here you might have some ideas of capturing on g6. The problem is there's just not enough compensation. Yes, you've captured the 2 pawns. The black king might be a little bit weak, but the black king is surprisingly safe on d8. There's no good way to continue. For example, rook ac1. Okay, you want to cut off the king. Now knight to f8, let's say, attacks the queen. Queen has to move. Now rook h7 attacks the queen. Once the queen moves, now bishop a6, and you are playing this without much problems. You will contest the rook on c1 at some point with some like rook to c8. The bishop can't really come into play, and the queen, you don't really have to worry about the queen. So black defends this easily. So instead, queen back to e2 by Fabi, and now king to f8. Now with some ideas of even king to g7, castling artificially. You can't just castle because the h6 pawn falls, but you can play king g7 and then bring the rook into the game. So here g3, we have bishop to a6 offering a trade of bishops, and now pawn to h4. We have pawn to h5 not allowing pawn to h5 by Fabi, and now knight to f3, grabbing hold of that g5 square, or rather preparing to grab hold of the g5 square, king to g7, and now bishop to g5, forcing Lenderman to make a decision as the bishop on e7 is hanging, so rook h to e8. You could also just trade everything, captures and captures, but for the moment, first rook to e8. Now black has successfully castled artificially, and now rook d to c1. Fabi not interested in being the first to start capturing pieces, but now Lenderman does. So bishop captures on d3, queen captures, bishop captures on g5, knight captures, and just rook a to c8. And it would seem Lenderman has solved all of his developing problems. Now it's merely a question of how to activate the knight on d7. And okay, if ever queen to f3 going after the f7 pawn, you can always play rook to e7, so it's not a problem. So king to g2 by Fabi, first improving the position of his king, and now the problem for black is that it's really not easy to activate the knight on d7, and it's also not easy to find any viable plan. For example, if rook captures on c1, which is something you want to play, let's say rook captures, now it's a white who controls the c file, but even if you try something like a4 to create a pass pawn, okay, a captures b3, the problem is there's a rook c3, and now you can no longer defend. If b2, just rook to b3, and if you move the rook here, then queen f3 is very problematic. Now there you cannot defend the f7 pawn by any other means than by moving the rook back to f8, and if you do this, then you lose the b3 pawn. So you know, there are some ideas here, but nothing really works. So you might try something like queen a7 to prepare a4, or you can play rook to a8 to play a4, but it's nothing you want to play and be proud of it, or, you know, just be happy about it. So it's a very hard position for black, and Lenderman finds a very nice idea of pawn to f6. And okay, e captures on f6, knight captures. Now he will be able to shift the knight over to e4, where the knight will be very strong. You have crippled your king side a little bit, but obviously he knows what he's doing. And Fabi plays queen to e2. Just putting the queen on the e file, going after the e6 pawn, and this is very, very important, because now, in order to play this, or in order to even survive this position, Aleksandr needs to play knight to e4, and it seems odd because it's a straight out pawn sacrifice. Knight captures, pawn captures, and queen captures, and now you would have to play rook to c3. You go after the b3 pawn. Also, the rook is very, very unpleasant on this diagonal. Queen to e5 check, you even give up another pawn, let's say king to h7, now rook captures on c3, b captures, and rook captures on a5, or even queen captures on a5, you offer a queen trade, now queen b7 check, and after the king moves, pawn to c2, and the passed c2 pawn will give sufficient compensation to Aleksandr for being down a pawn. So that's how you play this position. However, in the game he played king to g8, makes sense. You also don't want this knight captures on e6 to ever come with check if it happens, but it also blunders the game completely. But it's not all that clear how. You have to really, really spot it. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find what Lenderman missed here while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on realizing that the a5 pawn is hanging. If you found that, then you truly are a grandmaster material. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is of course first rook captures on c8. We remove one of the defenders of the e6 pawn, rook captures on c8, and now rook captures on a5, with the idea of removing the other defender of the e6 pawn. And of course, the rook cannot be captured. If you capture the rook, then comes a beautiful mating attack. Queen captures on e6, connecting with the rook, but in most lines you are really not interested in that rook. For example, king g7, queen e7 check, and now you're either getting checkmated, or okay, if you go to h6, then you have to suffer some windmill action, knight to f7 check. Of course, you can't go here, so you have to go back. Now knight to d6 check, okay, you will collect the rook, king h6, knight captures on c8, and it seems like, okay, maybe you're fine, you're just down a pawn, but you cannot survive this attack. Let's say queen a6, you have to guard the knight on f6, now queen to f8 check, king h7, queen to f7 check, king h6, and now knight to e7, attacking the g6 pawn. This will be checkmate, and now the only way to defend is to move the knight, but once you move it, knight to g8 is the other checkmate. So there you have it, what happens if you capture the rook. So is there counterplay without capturing the rook? Very unlikely. So rook to e8 was played, bringing back the defender of the e6 pawn, but now rook to a6 by Fabi, tripling up on the attack, so the rook also attacks the e6 pawn. Queen captures on d4, and now rook captures on e6. Threatening to capture the rook here. So rook to f8, you can't trade. If you trade queen captures on e6, will be pretty much the same attack. Queen to c2, now going after the weak g6 pawn, and again, there's no good way to defend it. If you play king g7, then just rook e7 check. If king h6, okay, the knight covers the h7 square, so you cannot deliver checkmate, but look at this, queen c1, with all sorts of nasty discoveries being threatened. There's just no way out of this. If knight g4, let's say you threaten the f2 pawn, just rook to h7 checkmate. So you can't move the knight, you can't not move the knight. I mean, whatever you do, the knight will just move, and I mean, it will either be mate in one, or, or depending on what black plays, you will either maybe win the queen or you will win the rook. So this is completely lost. It's actually mate in 5, but you know, you can pretty much move the pieces anywhere and you will still win. So after queen to c2, knight to e4 was played, blocking the queen's reach to the g6 pawn, but now you have to give it up because rook captures on g6 with check. King to h8, and now rook to h6 check. King to g8, and now only now knight captures on e4. D captures on e4, and now rook captures on h5. So okay, Lenderman finds a way to survive, he continues the game, but he's down 2 pawns. But that's important in chess. Sometimes you just need to survive and hope that your opponent blunders the game, because as you know, that does happen in chess. So queen to f6, now threatening some action along the f file, but it's nothing concrete. Just rook to g5 check, king to h8, and now queen to e2. The pawn is guarded, you're threatening queen to h5 check, this will be instant resign. So here Lenderman has to go into a rook endgame in order to just continue. Queen f3 check, queen captures, e captures with check, king h3, and now rook to c8, hoping to grab that f2 pawn. Maybe he can advance his f pawn to become a queen, but that's a lot of moves. So rook g4 by Fabi, rook to c2, now rook captures on b4, and rook captures on c2. So now it's 3 pawns to 1. Lenderman does have a pass pawn on f3, but it's very, very hard to actually push that pawn. So king g4, rook to f1, and now rook to b7, cutting off the black king. And now Fabi's plan is very simple. You will just advance your b pawn and win the game, as one usually does. And here, if f2, it's not a problem. Just king f3. You can't move the rook, otherwise the pawn hangs. If you don't move the rook, then king g2 will attack the rook and the pawn, so you will win that pawn, regardless of what black plays. So Lenderman doesn't even try, he just shuffles the king back and forth and waits for Fabi to push the pawn before he resigns. So pawn to b4, king h8, pawn to b5, king g8, pawn to b6, king to h8, and now rook to b8 check. king to g7, pawn to b7, and he was in this position on move 51 that Aleksandr Lenderman resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Whatever you play, if you play pawn to f2, it's merely a matter of rook g8 check. You sacrifice the rook to bring a queen into the game with tempo, and now it doesn't really matter what you do. The queen will give a few checks and then collect the rook on f1. And if you don't do that, again, well, if you play rook b1 to put pressure on this, you just play king captures on f3. It doesn't really matter. Up 3 pawns, completely winning. So yeah, very nicely played by both of them. Brilliant game by Lenderman, brilliantly defending, and even maybe it was even a better position for him throughout the entire game until this ill-advised king to g8 move. I mean, just leaving too much. The g6 pawn hanging and then allowing Fabio rook captures on a5. But you know, you can't see everything. If you could see everything, you would be world champion. Even the world champion doesn't see everything. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys are interested in the final standings, here they are. The final standings of the US Championship 2022. Fabiano Caruana wins $60,000, followed by Ray Robson, who was in pursuit for the entire tournament. This was one of his better tournaments, maybe even his best tournament so far. So congratulations to him as well. In third place, Linier Dominguez, Awander Liang, Wesley So, Jeffrey Xiong, Sam Shankland, Samuel Sevian, Hans Moke Nima, Levon Arnyan, Darius Shverch, Aleksandr Lenderman, Christopher Yu, and Elshan Moradiabadi in last place. And also, if you guys are interested, what does this mean for the ratings? Fabi even won some ratings here, so you can see these are the world top 25 players in classical chess. Carlsen and Ding still the only 2,800 players. Then you have in third and fourth Yanni Pomnish and Alireza Firuja. Nakamura in fifth. I think he went up one place because Wesley dropped 3 places, so that's why Nakamura is now number 5, even though he hasn't played any classical chess. Fabiano went up 2 places, so he is now in number 6. Then Giri in 7, Wesley in 8, Anand still in 9th place, incredible stuff. Karyakin in 10th, and then all of the others. And you can see Gukesh and Erigesi, Arjun still doing very well, number 22 and number 25. So yeah, that's the game. Those were the standings. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Very nicely played by Fabi, winning another title of US champion. We'll see. We'll see what comes next for him. Very, very exciting stuff. I would like to wish a very happy birthday to Jorn Birkman, and I would like to thank Ravishing Reptiles YouTube, Trevor Terris, Laxminarayan, Chakarpani, and Alan Psycho for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.